But hey, I'm so excited to see you here. We're in the middle of a series that we're calling How the Grinch Can Steal Your Christmas. And really the thought process behind this series is that you can be the Grinch, and that you, if left to your own devices, can actually ruin not just your Christmas, but a lot of parts of your life if you really think about it. And as you think about this season and all that comes with it, it's interesting that at times what we can do is we can take Jesus' birthday and we can make it about so many things that are unrelated to the Savior of the world being born. And so what we want to do in this series is, so that we aren't a Grinch, is we want to reorient our focus to this person, Jesus Christ, who was born for us. And we've been using a very common Christmas verse, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, to do this. And we'll read it in a second. But what we're going to see this morning is we're going to see actually that Jesus, he functions in our lives very, very parentally with us. And so I know that there are kids in the room and there are parents in the room. And so I kind of want to just maybe play this game with all of us together. And so here's what I know when it comes to kids and when it comes to parents. That we call this dinner at our house, but usually it involves us picking a type of food for our kids and then them coming up with all the reasons why they can't eat that type of food. Anyone ever been there before? We do it every night. Like Joanna she'll put something on like our daughter's plate, and I'll be like, well, babe, do you want to just go ahead and throw it right in the trash? Because, that's where it's going. That ain't going in her mouth. That's kind of how it works sometimes, right? Like there's a little bit of that. And so I just thought it might be fun if I don't know, show you a picture of a type of food, and if you don't like that type of food, you raise your hand. Okay, so you don't like it. Now listen to me, kids. Listen to me, kids. I'm asking your parents to play too. And here's why. Because someday your parents are going to grow up, and you're going to grow up, and they're going to come over to your house for Christmas. And now you know what you can make them eat for their good. Okay? So this is just as much for them as it is for you. Okay? So we're going to play this game together. I'll show you a type of food and you raise your hand if you don't like it. Okay? Very simple. Very simple. We want full participation. All right, the first food here. Green bean casserole. Anybody? Does not like green bean casserole. See all those hands? Those people are wrong. It's actually very good. Yeah. It's very good. All right, this one has nothing. I don't know why I picked it, but I thought, well, let's just pick a food. Cottage cheese. Who does not like cottage cheese? Yeah. I actually liked it. Then I realized how it was made, and I was like, I'm done. I don't need none of that in my life. Yeah. Okay. All right, cottage cheese. All right. Then here's this one. Fruit cake. Okay, guys. All right, put them down. Here's the deal. I'm going to go out on a limb. And I'm going to say that a lot of you who raise your hands have never had fruit cake. Because there is no way that fruitcake is worse than cottage cheese. I'm sorry, there's just no way. That doesn't even make sense. Like, I think that there's this myth or mystery with fruitcake that we just assume that it's bad. But I think we should all do ourselves a favor this Christmas and give it a try. Just pray about it. Okay, here we go. All right, another one here. Yeah, right? Okay, hands down. All right, we're going to switch it. I want to know who you are. Who likes Spam? Raise your hand if you like it. What is wrong with you? That is meat in a can, guys. I don't know. What I like about this graphic is that it says Spam 3 times, just in case you miss it. You wonder what it is. Kind of looks like dog food, nonetheless. All right, here's this one. Okay, we're back to if you don't like it. Okay, if you don't like it. Turkey. Who doesn't like turkey? Yeah, it's okay. Like, they're right there. Like, your hand's like right here. Like, you don't want anybody to see you, and I'm drawing all this attention to you right now. It's all right. Yeah, it's not that great. All right. So what about like this turkey? Who would not eat that turkey? That is a block of cheese. Yep, I just saw someone throw up in their mouth. And those are flaming hot Doritos around the outside. Anybody? I think I'd give it a try. I don't know. Like, there's just something about it that seems kind of festive. But I know those are silly. Yes, they're what they are. But here's what I know: that if your parents have asked you to eat something, that maybe you don't like or that you don't understand why they would ask you to do that. Here's why they do it. It's because they want you to create this habit of eating things that maybe you wouldn't normally pick, because they know that over the course of time, if you create that habit, it's actually going to be pretty good for you. So they do that. Like, another reason why parents might ask you to try something that you wouldn't normally try, it's because they know what you like, and they know that if you would just give it a try, you'd actually probably like it. And that's some of what parenting does, is we're helping our kids maybe do things they wouldn't normally do because we know that it's ultimately for their good. And here's the thing, kids don't always understand, right? They don't always see everything that the parent says. And that really brings us to the way that Jesus functions in our lives. That we've looked at all of these titles in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. And the one that we want to look at this morning is one where we see how he fathers us. Look at these titles here, chapter 9, verse 6. That for to us a child is born. To us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. Isn't it interesting that this baby that is going to be born, that he is born as a father? Now I know that studies would show that term, father, is difficult for some of you. And it's difficult for some of you probably for one of maybe two reasons. Maybe one, that your father wasn't a good father. They were aloof, they were distant. And because of that relationship on earth, that the idea of thinking of Jesus as a father, that it actually creates some significant hurdles for you. Because you're like, how could he be that? For some of you, the idea of a father, him being a father, is hard. It's not because you had a bad father, but it's because you actually had a really good one, and they're gone. And because they're gone, there's just this weight that comes with that word. That's just tough. And when you think of a father, you think of someone who's no longer with us. And here's the beauty of Jesus in that role, is when you think of him in that role, look at the title before that. That not only is he an everlasting Father, but he's also a mighty God. And since he is also a mighty God, that means that he really does walk headfirst into some of those concerns that you might have. That if you struggle with the idea of a father because your father was aloof, here's what you know he's God. And because he's God and he is a father, that means that he's greater than any dad that you could ever dream of. That means that he fulfills that role in that relationship in a way that could honestly be described as perfect. Why? Because he's God and everything he does is perfect. And if he's God and he's saying, hey, I'm going to relate to you as a father, then that means that he's going to feel everything you feel when you feel pain. That means that he's going to understand the things that you're going through when you're going through the things that you're going through. And here's what we know, because we know that Jesus wasn't just born to be born, but he was also born to die. And that role, that title that he wears, that you get to experience that at great cost to himself. But that's what a good father does, right? They go out of their way to show love to their children, no matter what it might cost them. That's what God does. And maybe if you're one who the struggle with the word isn't the fact that he's a father and yet a bad father, but it's the fact that you've lost one, then that word everlasting should bring comfort to you. Because that means that this perfect father who will never let you down, who will be everything that you ever dreamed of, is always going to be there. That paternal relationship that he offers you, that it actually extends beyond this life to the next life. And that our hope in this relationship doesn't just stop here, but it goes beyond the grave. And so maybe you see that term and you're like, man, here's my struggle with everlasting Father, is I thought that God the Father was the Father, and Jesus was the Son, so how is he like born as a father? And I'm not really going to dive into the Trinity. I'm going to let mom and dad handle that at home, but this is what I would say, is that everlasting Father, that's not talking about how Jesus interacts with God the Father. That's talking about how Jesus interacts with us. That this is a representation of how Jesus sees you and engages you. And he engages you in a way that would be consistent with how a father would look after their children. You see a little bit of a picture of this in Romans chapter 8. Let me read it to you here. In Romans chapter 8, verse 15 through 17, it says this. It says, "For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you've received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him, in order that we may be glorified with him." That God and that Jesus, they function as our Father. So the question then to ask then is, how does he function as a father in our life? And I'm going to give you 3 ways he does that this morning. The first way is this, is that he provides. That he, as a father, he's going to provide, which really fits the whole Christmas thing, right? Like when you think about Christmas, it doesn't take very long to get to provision, because you probably think about like maybe a gift that you got that really hit the mark, or maybe a gift that you got that really didn't hit the mark. I was thinking about the Christmas, this was several years, I think I was 12 years old, so it was like 5 years ago, and we decided to go to Nebraska to have Christmas morning in Nebraska with our family. And so it's Christmas morning, and we're sitting there at my aunt's house, and they're doing that thing where they pass out all the gifts, and you get the pile of gifts in front of you. And I'm looking, and I'm sitting next to my cousin, Andrew, and I noticed that him and I have a gift that looks the same. Like, I don't know if you've ever been there before, but you're like, okay, they were very creative. They got everybody, like, and it's okay, like, whatever. And so he's sitting next to me. He's got this box, and it's about the same weight. And we're kind of talking about the gift because we think we got the same thing. And so we start opening presents as a family, and we're going around the circle. You've been there before, probably, if that's how you do it. And we get to my cousin Andrew, and he opens the gift. And it's a PlayStation 2. Okay, now kids, that used to be cool, okay? I know there's 4 of them now. When I was 12, PlayStation 2 was the ticket, okay? So I'm like, same box? You got a PlayStation 2? And so I'm kind of making eyes with my mom, thinking we need to come to Nebraska for Christmas more often. Aunt Sherry is loaded. This is awesome. And so it comes to me, and he has the PlayStation 2, and we have the same box, and so I'm like, I'm going to open this one. And I'm opening with all this hope and expectation of what I've always wanted, because it's going to be a PlayStation 2. And I'm thinking oh, but we don't have the TV with the 3 prongs, so we're going to have to get an adapter. And I'm processing all of this stuff in my head. And I open it. And it's metal brain games in a box similar size to the PlayStation 2. I was 12, so I knew what I needed to do, but I'll tell you what, it was really hard in that moment to act excited about those brain games. It was a fine gift. I'm super thankful for it. Aunt Sherry, if you're watching online, what are you doing watching online? We don't even really talk anymore. But still, here's the deal. but it was a fine gift. There was nothing. It was great. She was thoughtful. She didn't have to give me anything. But in my heart, I'm but the PlayStation 2 you got for Andrew. Okay, sometimes that's what we do with how God gives us things. Sometimes what God does is he gives us something that's fine, something that's really good, something that we need. And instead of being excited about that thing that we've been given, we look at what other people have and we think, man, I really wish I had that. That instead of learning to say, oh man, we're oh man, but why did they get that and I'm stuck with this? And here's what we're saying when we think that and when we go down that road. What we're saying is God, I don't think you're a good father. We're saying, God, you know what? I actually don't think that you really know what I need, because if you knew what I needed, you would give me what they have, not what I'm stuck with. But ultimately, he comes to be our provider. And isn't that some of the story of the Grinch? That instead of focusing on what he's been given, all he's doing is looking at the joy in other people. And instead of trying to figure out why until the end of the movie, he just sits there and he stews and he gets mad and he tries to take away Christmas from them. Why? Because he's not content with what he's been given, because he's too focused on what other people have. And this is the promise of Scripture. The promise of Scripture is that Jesus Christ is our everlasting Father. But not only is he our everlasting Father, but he would say that he's actually pretty good at giving gifts. Look at what he says here in Matthew chapter 7. He says, which of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or, if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? That's a bad parent if they do that. I'd like a fish. Here's a rattlesnake. If you, then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? If that is true, man, shouldn't that give you a sense of confidence in what you got? I mean, shouldn't that do something with your life, that anytime you ask anything to God, he's going to give you what you need? Like, isn't that what it's saying? And the reason why we can trust that is because when Jesus came, he came as an everlasting Father. And what a good father does is they provide. They take care. Not only does a good father provide, but they also protect. That they protect. That if you're a father, you are going to protect your children. I'm going to have him throw back up there Romans 8, 15, and 16. And look at this. Look at how he functions paternally for us. It says, for you do not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you receive the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears with ours that we are children of God. Why do people fear? Why do people get afraid? Well, it's probably because they're afraid that maybe someone might hurt them, right? People get afraid because they think that maybe something that they have might be taken from them. They become afraid because maybe they think that something might happen to someone that they love. There's all kinds of reasons why we get afraid, but if you look at there, it's like God gave us a spirit so we don't have to be afraid. Why? Because as our Father, he's going to protect us. That as our Father, he's going to do what he can to give us what we need, and he knows what we need protected. I found some pictures of like these animals that are like unlikely protectors. Okay, so the first one is a picture of a dog and a duck. The dog's name is what is his name? You usually need to know that. It's Fred, and the duck's name's Dennis. And you know, if you think about it, that really does look like a Fred, like it does. And I don't know if I see the Dennis there, but this is the story. Okay, so this dog, he found the duck that had no parent. It was just by itself. And what the dog did was he took it under his paw and took care of it. Saw that it didn't have anything, and so it saw that it didn't have a mother. The mother was probably mauled or something happened, and this baby was just left to fend for itself. And what does Fred do? Is Fred says, I'm going to take care of it. Here's another one. This is a picture of a chimpanzee and a tiger. Yeah, isn't that sweet? And here's the story here. That tiger's mother died in a hurricane, and she was left to fend for herself. And this chimpanzee, and this is at an animal reserve. This isn't like out in the wild. I feel like in the wild it might have been a different story. But in this animal reserve, this chimpanzee has taken the responsibility of just like protecting this tiger. And okay, isn't there something like when you think about that that's just like, oh man, that is sweet. Oh man, isn't that cool? Because there's something about like being protected that you're like, oh wow, like that, how cool is it that that monkey's going to take care of that tiger and that dog's going to take care of that duck? And it's cool because of the place in life where those animals are, like they're able to do that, and they're able to provide some source of like comfort, and the animals that are little don't have to be afraid. But here's the beauty of our situation. God says he's going to take care of us. That we might feel alone, that we might feel like we're by ourselves, we might feel like we've got nothing. But it says he's our Father. And if he's our Father, then that means we can know that he's going to protect us. I love the way the psalmist says this in Psalm 91. It says this, it says, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust." Refuge and fortress, those are battle terms. What it's saying here is it's saying that God will keep you safe. It's because he's your Father. And what I want us to see, though, is that's not just like an obligatory thing. It's not something where God's like, well, I created the world, they're there, yeah, I got it. But there's like, he's a Father. And so there's like this relational equity that comes in how he protects us. That it's not an obligation or because he feels like he has to. But rather, it's deeper than that. I'm going to have him throw back up Romans 8, because there's a word there in 8:15, and it's that word adoption. Like, when someone is adopted, oh man, that's beautiful. Like when someone is adopted, like they become part of a different family. That there is love. For someone to adopt someone else, that is not something you take on flippantly, but that's something you do out of intense love for a person. And there's actually a story. These are two pictures. This is Kaylee and Shelby. And these are two girls in our church. Difficult situation. And it brought them into a new family. And what happened was about a week ago, they were adopted into a different family. And so this morning I emailed Tammy, and I said, Tammy, can you tell me like what it means to you that you adopted those girls? And I want to read her words to you because I think it illustrates perfectly how God the Father looks at us. Look at this. What does it mean to us that we adopted them? It means that we are their parents. It means that we love them and that we need to provide for them and protect them and make them happy and hug them when they're sad. The fact that we adopted them, that it means that we are responsible for them, that we're committed to them, that we're a team, and that now we're all in it together. Like, isn't that beautiful? That's like we're adopted by God. That when he sees us, in the same way that now they're part of a family, like we're part of his. Like that's what's available. And as part of that family, there's protection. And finally, what we see God do is he functions parentally, is he points. He points. That he points us in the direction that we need to go. That he tells us what we need to do. Because here's what I can tell you about parents. Okay, my dad, I love my dad. He's a great guy. Here's what I can tell you about my dad. That if I am doing something and he thinks there's a different way to do it, he ain't going to hold that information back from me. Because that's what they do. Right? Like that's what parents do. Like there's another way. They're going to make sure that you know that they think there's another way. And in the same way as God and as Jesus, as he functions as an everlasting Father to us, he's going to look at your life and he's going to say, this is the way that you need to do it. I wouldn't go that, I'd do this. You're not thinking about that right. You need to think about it this way. That's what he does as he points us in the directions that we're to go. But the thing is, it's on us to choose what we want to do. And if you want to be a Grinch this Christmas, you can say, you know what? I know what God would expect, but instead I'm going to go ahead and do my own thing. I know how God would want me to handle this. I know that God would want me to focus on this thing, but instead I'm going to focus on all these other things because really that's what a Grinch would do. That they would look at good advice and they would say, nah, you know what? I think I actually know better. And as I started thinking about the holidays, what's the biggest challenge with people in the holidays? It's relationships, right? It's those interpersonal relationships. You might even have a family gathering coming up, and the thought of it gives you a stomachache, doesn't it? You're just like, oh man, it's tough. And I want to read this to you. We read this in 1 Peter, and this is Jesus' way of pointing us and how we should handle our interpersonal relationships. And in the same way, you don't have to take my advice. You don't have to. I don't have to listen to my dad. But I'm telling you that this is what he says would be best. And so just kind of look at it. This is how he says we should interact with one another. I'm just going to read the bold words. Have self-control. Love one another earnestly. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. Don't you love it that Peter threw in without grumbling? Because we all know that person who shows hospitality and they complain about it and everybody knows they show hospitality. And then he says, if you've received a gift, use it to serve one another. Could you imagine if every gathering that you had all of those things present? I mean, you imagine that coworker that drives you crazy if they loved people earnestly. Can you imagine what it would be like if your uncle had more self-control? Can you imagine that person who hosted you, they could show hospitality and not complain about it, and maybe that would just make the day a little bit better? Can you imagine what that would be like? And if people would just interact in a way where they've kind of been given a gift and they choose to celebrate and use that gift and help others along. I mean, could you imagine what that would be like? Here's what I can tell you. You can't control any of those people. They're going to do what they're going to do, but you can't control you. What you can do is you can walk into this holiday season, you can walk into anything, and you can say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do all those things. This is how I'm going to model my life. This is how I'm going to model my behavior. Because I can tell you this is how Jesus is pointing you to do that. And just if you do, just think of the difference that it would be. And if that is something that you do, no Grinch will be able to steal your Christmas because you're going to be following the direction of the person who's pointing you in the way that you're to go. So kind of as we wrap up, we've spent a lot of time talking about him being a father. He's a father. That's what he does. He's there. And maybe for you, it's not the father thing. It's not the paternal thing that's hard for you. But for you, the part that's difficult is the relational thing. To say, I'm going to trust someone in such a way where I'm going to let them provide for me. To say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to trust someone in such a way that I'm going to let them protect me. And not only am I going to let them protect me, but when they point, that's where I'm going to go. That level of trust in a relationship might be really, just hard. Because what you've experienced with relationships is that they break apart. And to trust someone like that, there's just something, I don't know. So my friend Nathan's going to come up, and I want to just kind of illustrate it this way. And so and I think the question is, I'll see the first one first. That's a good sentence. And so this is this represents two people, okay? This is you, and this is relationships with other people. Okay, and if you can tell, there's been some serious strain in this relationship. Probably happened because, well, things used to be good. Like it used to be one circle. But now where it was connected, it's actually broken apart. And I would guess I could probably tell you why. Probably someone on one side of this line said something that hurt someone's feelings. Maybe they did something that was never forgiven. Maybe it's because there's a hurt that someone on one side just can't let go of. And so you've got this relationship that was strong. I mean, they're all connected. And now there's just significant strain. And what happens over time is that strain takes a really good relationship where people were really connected, and where there was one circle, that timing was beautiful. Now we got two. Like where there was one thing that was super tight, super connected, now there are two different circles. And I would bet you probably have some relationships in your life that used to be like this, but now they're like that. And that right there is probably why you struggle with trust. Because to trust God like that, I mean, what if you let him down and you used to have that intimacy and then this is where you're at? This other circle, though, represents your relationship with God. I'm going to grab it. And so sometimes that happens with our relationship with God, where we do things, right? Like we love Jesus, and this only works if you love him, you're committed to following him. But even if you are, like there are things that are going to happen in your life. I always got some more cutting to do. Oh, look at that. That was smart, so I wouldn't trip on it. Like things are going to happen in your life that are going to, maybe it seems like create a distance. You did something you regret. You're embarrassed. It's hard, and you keep doing things, and where there was continuity, you're like, oh man, God, I don't know. Like me and God used to be good, but I've done a lot of stuff. But here's the beauty of him, is that he's an everlasting Father. And as much as we might try, as you can hear him cutting the circle, that as much as we might try, he's everlasting. And if he's everlasting, as hard as we try, instead of having two different circles, we just have a bigger circle. Because if we're committed to him, if we say, Jesus, I trust you. Jesus, I love you. My life is yours. The part of being an everlasting Father is him saying, I'm not going to give up on that relationship if you don't. So you might do things that would create distance. That you might do things that you regret. That you might do things that make you feel pretty stupid and ashamed. And where that might create distance with every other relationship. That with God, as he's an everlasting Father, all it's going to do is just make a bigger circle. Because he loves you. He cares about you. That he came to be your wonderful counselor. He came to be a mighty God. He came as an everlasting Father, and he came as a Prince of Peace. And confronted with that reality, you've got to ask yourself, okay, what do I do with that? Do I trust that? Am I willing to put my faith in him and what he says that he is? Or am I going to not listen to him when he points? And I'm just going to think that I know better. And if that's it, how's that gone for you? That he wants it. But if there's distance, it's because of you, not because of him. And you can know that because he's a Father. Let's pray.
Thank you for watching our services. If you have questions or you would like more information, you can visit us online at nlspringfield.com. We'd also love to have you join us at one of our Sunday morning services. We have programs at 9:30 and 11 for adults, students, and kids. We hope to see you there.